it's Halloween. Yeah, that's all I have. I don't do the big into the dress up and costumes and all that stuff. But I like talking about Halloween. Halloween's one of my favorite times of the year because we get some great horror films. We get, some great moments of horror. You can go and you can watch like Sinister or these scary horror films like The Exorcist, and your heart rate pulses, and the chills and the hair stands up. It's just a fun time of year. Plus there's candy, plus there's trick or treating, plus there's Halloween Horror Nights. It's just it's a fun time of year outside of Thanksgiving, which I like to eat. So, but yeah. So, anyways, thank you so much for watching. This is Movie Importance Flashback Reviews Halloween Edition. As you can see, I've kind of cropped down to a 4:3 frame, like a TV with a little weird motions and stuff like that. I like talking about these movies because Halloween movies can be all sorts of things. They can be, low budget, they can be high budget, they can be found footage. There's such a wide range of horror films that it's a unique genre of filmmaking. And most people, most actors and actresses, most directors, most like creative talents start out in horror because not only is it easy to do, it's not easy to do. It's a outlet to get yourself pushed forward, but people can be creative. Comedy's hard, drama's hard, but horror films are something that you can just go full tilt boogie on, and that's what makes it fun. Every director imaginable, from Steven Spielberg to Quentin Tarantino to Tobe Hooper, have done horror films on top of everything else they've done, and it just makes it a great genre. The director I'm talking about today, Scott Derrickson, has done a lot of horror films. He's done stuff like Deliver Us from Evil and Day of the Earth Still, if you want to consider that horror, and so on and so forth. I think The Exorcism of Emily Rose, or one of those films he did, and he's a great. To me personally, he has a great style for his horror directing. He knows how to create tension. He knows how to create uncomfortableness, and he does it really well. It's not always perfect, but horror filmmaking is based on your personal taste. But anyways, I'm going to talk about a movie today that's called Sinister, and it's, of course, like I said, directed by Scott Derrickson. It's written by C. Robert Cargill and Scott Derrickson, and is one of my favorite horror films of the last 20 years. This movie is not the most unique film I've ever seen, but it's one of the most creative and one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. And it's a movie that I love to watch every Halloween. I think it's perfect. It like gave me intense goosebumps and sweating in the theater. And it's a movie that is just has a interesting premise to it. And the family that lives in this house, of course, is played by Ethan Hawke, Juliet Rylance, Michael D'Addario, and Clare Foley. And they are a normal family outside of Ethan Hawke's character, who is a writer. He has written this one famous novel, but he is having writer's block problems. And the writer's block problems is he can't figure out what he wants to do. So he learns about this house that had this murder of this family, and so he's going to move his family in there. It doesn't seem like it makes any sense. Why would you do that to your family? But he's obsessed. He's a crime writer. He thinks this is a good subject, and he can learn a lot from it. But he doesn't tell his family, which is a trope in horror films and so on and so forth. Well, we have two police officers in the very beginning of the story. One is played by James Ransone, and he's in it chapter 2. And one is also Fred Dalton Thompson, who is actually well known for being a politician in real life. And they are trying to warn Ethan Hawke's character, why are you here? Are you doing this, to make money? You're kind of not a good person for that. And they're telling him about this family, which you see at the very beginning of this movie, who was hung, and then their little kid or daughter disappeared. And it's really disturbing. Like, when you start watching this movie, when that scene comes on, it's really, really disturbing. But, Ethan Hawke, being the greedy bastard that he is, he takes his family there. Well, the funny thing about this movie is it goes into the supernatural, and it goes into the horrifying nature of what this creature, this entity, this supernatural being really is. And the basic storyline is, he finds these like a Super 8mm reels. And he doesn't, like I said, he hasn't told his family what's going on. So he starts watching these reels, these Super 8 movies. And this is why I love this movie so much, is it's willing to go there on its disturbing factor. Sometimes when you watch horror films, they aren't willing to take risk And yeah, there are some edited stuff out of here that you don't see because it needs to keep its R rating instead of its NC-17 rating, which it could have gotten. But the motions, the creative nature of these found footage, which are technically snuff films in a way, are really kind of inventive. You know, you don't see horror films a lot like this that aren't Hostel or the murder films or whatever. This is a movie about a guy who gets obsessed with watching these movies, and he starts learning about what this situation is, and starts learning about why these families were killed the way they were. And we learn about this creature called the Bagul, and the Bagul is this entity or supernatural force that it kind of inhabits the kids of the family. And what makes it so creative is the footage that you're seeing doesn't really make any sense because you see the whole family, but who is shooting the footage? And that's what the storyline is trying to get itself eventually to, is who is shooting the footage? Who is this Bagul who Ethan Hawke thinks is just a random guy going around, murdering families and taking kids? But there's so much more than that. And so he gets more and more disturbed. The Ethan Hawke's writer character, things start happening as they do in horror films, where stuff starts. For instance, his son. In one night, he finds him in a box and he starts freaking out. And then his daughter, who likes to draw on walls, is starting to draw like disturbing imagery. And then you start seeing little kids all over the place, like ghost kids, and they are. I don't know if they're warning or they're trying to kind of possess the little girl, Clare Foley's character, who's like the main kid, like kind of like the Omen with Damien and stuff like that. But it's just so creative and so unique in what it's doing that I think it's fascinating. It's interesting that they took snuff films and kind of threw it in there, because when you're watching them, you are like completely disturbed, and that's what makes a good horror film. But like I said, stuff starts happening. For instance, one night Ethan Hawke's character hears something in the attic, and he goes up into the attic and he sees the kids watching whatever's on the screen, and they turn around and they do the for silence or whatever, and all of a sudden the Bagul pops up, and then all of a sudden the Bagul pops up in front of Ethan Hawke's character and he falls to the ground, and stuff like that really makes this movie really unique and stuff like that. But and there are a couple things that bother me about this movie. It's not the horrifying nature. It's the idea of every single horror film, especially in this day and age, and it was especially in Countdown and Drag Me to Hell. There's always that one person that the main character goes to kind of explain what's going on, to find more information. And it's so prevalent a lot of times, it's kind of weird and kind of off-putting. But this character in this movie is played by Vincent D'Onofrio. At least I think it looked like Vincent D'Onofrio. I don't want to be 100% sure because he's not credited in the movie. But we find out the Bagul is just this creature that likes taking kids to feed off their souls and stuff like that. And that is a little whatever. It's kind of a trope that gets a little boring after a while. But I like the Bagul enough that I think he's kind of creative. I think the fact that he looks like a heavy metal creature of like you could be part of like Slipknot or something like that is really fascinating. And then one thing I do like about reading about this movie and what C. Robert Cargill and Scott Derrickson did is they went onto like an Instagram or an IMDb page or whatever, or a Yahoo page or whatever, and they found this mask for like $500 of this Bagul, and they paid for the rights of it, and they gave it they gave it its own style and look, and it's just a really impressive look for something that is low budget and not technically scary if you see it realized like you do in Sinister 2, but using it sparingly, like in Jaws, using it enough where you see him in like reflections of the water, you see him in the background, the very background with the very first scene. It does work, and it does work pretty well. So, but I do like the performances of Ethan Hawke and Juliet Rylance. I think they're good for what they're doing in this movie. Ethan Hawke always has this charisma. He always exudes this like aura about him that just really works. And to see him to start to go into madness as he watches more and more of these films, I think is just fun and unique and kind of interesting, because he's been in other horror films like The Purge and stuff like that, and he's never like 100% that much fun. But here he just looks like he's like full tilt into it, and it just makes it a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, like everyone else is decently in this movie. James Ransome, who's the main cop, is having a lot of fun for his role, and he pops up in Sinister 2. And he's kind of like Jack Sparrow in a way, in the fact that they use him too much in the second movie, so it kind of ruins the mystique of the character. But he's a lot of fun. And then when he figures out what's going on, and you get to the very end of the movie, and the thing that's very interesting about what James Ransome finds out is he figures out that each family who has died has moved into the house of the family that had died beforehand, so leading back to the 60s, and how the Bugul eventually wreaks havoc and gets to him is the family moves to a new house, and therefore they are doomed to be murdered or killed. And what happens in this movie? Ethan Hawke and his family move to this house of the family that was hung, and they move back into their new old house because he gets scared and he just finally gets tired of it. And this movie has one of the most disturbing endings, not gore wise, but just in presence. And it's basically the young girl has finally been possessed by the Bagul, and she axes her family to death. Everybody dies. Ethan Hawke dies. Juliet Rylance dies. The son dies, and it's an interesting way to end a movie because you really think the family all has escaped, but kind of like Drag Me to Hell, it has a twist in it, a twist and turn that you kind of don't see coming, but it makes a lot of sense. For instance, in Drag Me to Hell, she gets dragged to hell because something that Justin Long's character does. But I'm going to talk about that next year. But yeah, it's a movie that just does a lot with its material. I think this writing is really strong in this movie, and I think it's horrifying in a good way. It does some stuff that unsettles you, unnerves you. I really love the music in this movie. I put a little bit of the song that you hear throughout the movie in the intro of my video because it's really creepy, it's really dark, it's really disturbing, and it's just really uncomfortable. And when you hear it play, you just start to your hair on your arms start to raise up, and everything about it is just, oh god, it's unsettling. But like I said, Scott Derrickson, I give a lot of credit to. He did something really unique here. This was one of the movies that got him Doctor Strange, as well as C. Robert Cargill. And I think they're a great talent, of writing and acting, or writing and directing duo. I think they do a nice job. I think they know how to write. I think they know how to write well. And Sinister 2, unfortunately, was not a great movie. I know they both wrote that movie, but here in this movie, when I went to the theater and watched it, I had a good time. I was surprised, and it became one of my favorite horror films, like I said, the last 20 years, because it was a unique take on the horror genre. Not the most original, but a unique take, and the things it's doing, and the fact that, as the plot unfolds, it does a almost twist in 180 that really surprises you. And like I said, I like it. I like it a lot, and I definitely recommend it if you're a horror fan. If you're not, it can be really unsettling to a lot of people, but there you go. But yeah, that'll do it. That is my Halloween review of Sinister. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen this movie, what you think of it. I'd be really interested to know. I know a lot of people don't like horror films, which is fine. But the people who do like this movie, I want to know why you like it. If you don't like it, tell me why as well. But anyways, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit the notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. And of course, comment below on any video that you watch on my channel. But otherwise, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out.